The Torts-Remedies fact pattern from July of 2002 is not a difficult question intellectually. What makes this a hard question is finishing within time limits. This is a dense question with quite a few issues. As always, let's start by having a look together at the call of the question. Quote, what must Sally prove to make a prima facie case in each suit? What defenses might manufacturer and doc each raise? And what is the likely outcome of each suit? Discuss. Well, this call of the question affords us an excellent opportunity to outline before we even read the fact pattern, and it also gives us a very clear hint about what is likely to be at issue. We know that we've got two lawsuits, and we're going to have to analyze them both. Sally versus manufacturer and Sally versus doc. For each of these lawsuits, Sally is going to have at least one theory of liability, and she's also going to have at least one prayer for relief. Now, you don't have to be hugely sophisticated to intuit that this is going to be a products liability problem, at least in part. Manufacturers hardly ever coexist with doctors on essay questions that don't involve products liability. So, in our minds, we are considering strict liability, negligence, and warranty causes of action under products liability for both of these two defendants. As it turns out, that assumption won't be entirely correct, but it won't be useless either. So before we even read the fact pattern, we can make a quick little outline, the two lawsuits, indicating that the plaintiff is going to have theories of liability and a prayer for relief. Let's go to the top of the problem and have a look at it together. In paragraph 1, we meet the plaintiff and we meet the manufacturer and the doctor. Manufacturer creates drugs that fight allergies. And in paragraph 1, we're told right up front that, quote, although manufacturer knew there was a remote risk of permanent loss of eyesight associated with the use of the pills, manufacturer did not issue any warnings. That is as clear a tip that we are dealing with products liability as a fact pattern can give you. A failure to warn can lead to a finding of strict liability, and it also can be an act of negligence. So we're already considering products liability against manufacturer. We can fill out our outline right now. In Sally's lawsuit against the manufacturer, she's going to be making claims of strict liability, negligence, and warranty. The doctor prescribes these pills at the end of paragraph 1. In paragraph 2, we get into the damages. Sally suffers a substantial loss of eyesight and a potential for complete blindness. If she'd been warned of these risks, she never would have taken the pills. Next, in this second paragraph, we learn about Doc's situation. He says he knew of the risk of eyesight loss, but he prescribed them anyway, and he failed to warn her. That equals professional negligence for sure. In paragraph 3, we get to an interesting mitigation of damages issue. Sally's brother, Bud, offers to donate a cornea to her. He's got fine eyesight, and he is a compatible donor. It would have restored fine eyesight to one of Sally's eyes with minimal risk to her, and the insurance covered the cost of this surgery. But Sally turns it down, and she becomes completely blind not that long thereafter. In paragraph 4, we learn that Sally files a products liability suit against the manufacturer, seeking to recover damages from her lost eyesight. She also sues Doc for negligence. Well, it isn't hard to outline our lawsuit between Sally and Doc. It will go duty, breach, causation, damages, and defenses. And then we're going to reach a conclusion with regard to Doc's liability. So now let's have a look together at the model answer I have, actually the outline of issues that I've generated before writing the model answer to this question. Notice that this outline doesn't do anything more sophisticated than we were able to figure out fairly readily at the time that we read the call of the question and read the fact pattern quickly. Sally versus manufacturer is a products liability action. You'll see in my outline that I consider strict products liability, negligence, and warranty. I focus on the plaintiff's duty to mitigate, and I reach a conclusion in favor of the plaintiff. As you look at my outline, under strict products liability and negligence, you're going to see here I don't do anything terribly intellectual. I'm being much more mechanical about it than one might think. All I'm doing is presenting the elements of strict liability in a product's context, and in negligence, I'm just rattling off the elements that all of us know perfectly well. Then we turn to the second lawsuit, Sally versus Doc. And here I talk about duty, breach, causation, and damages, followed by defenses and a conclusion that, once again, is in favor of the plaintiff. You might notice under causation that I indicate that we'll talk about both actual and proximate cause. It's a common error to fail to do that, not necessarily a fatal error, but our job is to be as meticulous and thorough as possible in our analysis. So, this is a fairly straightforward fact pattern to outline. I don't want to read my answer to you, but there are a number of aspects about this answer that I want to direct your attention to. These are themes that are going to replay throughout this course, and not just in torts, but in every single subject on the exam. Notice, up front, under our first lawsuit, looking at the very first paragraph of the answer that I've presented, I lead with the facts. I indicate that Sally has lost her eyesight as a result of taking these allergy pills, and I focus on the defendant manufacturer and then move on to the theories of liability. Notice the first thing that I write under Roman numeral 1A, strict products liability, is about as close to an extensive definition as I ever provide. You know that one of the core ideas behind this master essay method is you want to stay away from boilerplate and focus your attention and your time on analysis. Well, all of us agree that at least some law has to find a home in your answer, and so here, as I set up strict products liability, this is where I tuck in a very brief discussion of the law. But ultimately, I focus our attention on the analysis. We turn to the defect, and I point out that manufacturer knew that there was a risk of eyesight loss in this product, and it failed to issue warnings. Not only that, the advertising that manufacturer presented advertised the pills as being both modern and safe. So I think it's never too important to fail to focus on these ideas. Look, the idea is to find a home for the facts. We are told that the manufacturer advertised these pills as being modern and safe, and they are neither. And it's important to make that point. It is more important to make that sort of point than to show the examiners that you can bark off a lot of boilerplate law. Next, we turn to causation. And here, the fact that the doctor also failed to exercise reasonable care is relevant as we consider our analysis of strict liability against the manufacturer. It's relevant, but it doesn't intervene in such a fashion as to absolve the manufacturer of liability. Doc's conduct doesn't break the chain of causation. Damages isn't an issue that I spend much time on here. Two very short sentences cover it. Damages are obvious. This isn't a question that's focusing our attention really on damages. We're told that our plaintiff has suffered blindness. That is a drastic damage, and we're not given facts beyond that require our analysis. I conclude, not surprisingly, that the manufacturer is going to be strictly liable to this plaintiff as a result of the harm that the plaintiff suffered as a result of using this product. Next, I turn to the second theory of liability under products liability, negligence. And here, I focus on the standard elements: duty, breach, causation, and damages. You'll notice that I don't define negligence up front. If you'd chosen to do so, it's certainly not wrong. But I don't see how we've got time for elaborate definitions on a fact pattern this dense with issues. Here, I spend the bulk of my time on causation, because I think that's where the facts direct our attention. I include a complete analysis of all the elements, but causation is where I judge the action to be, and that's where I focus my attention. Again, I find that the intervening negligence of Doc isn't serious enough to absolve manufacturer of liability for negligence in Sally's products liability claim. I focus briefly on defenses, but I conclude that the manufacturer is liable to the plaintiff for negligence. In warranty, you'll see that I don't find elements to hang my hat on, and this is actually the most dense analysis that I provide under the theories of liability. I don't think there's anything surprising going on here. Have a look at it and see whether or not you agree. Finally, I turn to Sally's duty to mitigate. And here we have to do some fairly detailed analysis. I'm not going to read it to you, but I counsel you to have a fairly careful look at it, because I think you're going to agree that this is an example, by me, of clear legal analysis, and that's where you're going to earn your points once you've spotted the issues. So, finally, I conclude in the first lawsuit that Sally prevails under all of her products liability theories, and I indicate that her damages award is not going to be reduced because she refused the surgery that was possibly available to her. The second lawsuit is relatively simple. Since we don't have to pursue Doc under products liability theories, all we have to do is focus on his potential liability to our plaintiff for professional negligence. And you'll see that up front, once again, as we get into this lawsuit, I lead with the facts. I focus on Sally's damages lawsuit for negligence, and very briefly, I indicate that she's going to show Doc breached his duty, causing her damages. So, in my way, I do work in a definition of negligence, but I do so in a way that is sensitive to the facts and that uses up as few words and as little space as possible. The duty element is not a difficult one to establish. Doc is going to be held to a reasonable standard of care for doctors in his region. Breach is, in my judgment, a somewhat more complicated issue, and you'll see here, again, I focus my attention on the facts, and I counsel you to do the same thing. Find a home for the facts, explain their impact on the legal analysis, and you will achieve a passing score on any essay question. Finally, I focus on causation and damages, and on defenses, briefly, just to indicate that Doc doesn't really have any defenses, and I conclude that Sally is going to win damages from Doc for his professional negligence. So, we've had a chance to look at a recent fact pattern focusing our attention on products liability and negligence. This is not a difficult essay question conceptually. It's a rather difficult essay question in the real world because it's hard to finish on time given the number of issues. That's why outlining is such an important skill to sharpen. And you can see, using my approach, it's possible to do a very good outline for this fact pattern quite quickly. And that's useful because it gives us a chance to put our attention where it belongs, on legal analysis of the facts presented.